And you guys are both on mute.
Oh, sorry, it was hidden by a bar. I see it. Okay, so
Yeah.
Alex, so but you're in Moscow, you're in Russia, and so when you
Yeah.
came, and we brought you on remotely. I mean, it's also a big step for us. We're like, it's such an important project. We're bringing on all these designers that are not in office in San Francisco, and this was 5 years ago. So how was, as a designer, and we found you in Dribble, I believe, right? And as a designer, how did you feel working for a company that, you're basically in Moscow, you're Russian, you're working for this American company and out of the San Francisco office with that team? I mean,
Mhm.
what kind of nightmare was that?
I mean, for me, fantasy at that point, it was something unreachable. Like I I wasn't quite sure that I could stay for longer. That's why I just kept working in a bank. And yeah, it's I
It's
mean,
actually,
the level of like the quality, the level of the design was just incredible, and I just didn't expect that I worked for so long there, to be honest.
But it worked out,
it's
and now you're
actually,
still here 4 or 5 years later, and
Yeah.
you're killing it. But let me ask you, Alex, like, if we could take the 10 Russian designers and pivot them against 10 American designers, some kind of competition, who do you think would win?
In um, in visual design,
Oh yeah, just design in general. What do you think? Let's be honest.
yeah, Russian. I think so.
Yeah, I
I
think there's a
mean,
lot of talent. What, wait, Ash, what about you? You're from Australia, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, there is also a lot of good Australian designers out there on the planet, right?
Definitely, yes. I came on board about 3.5 years ago from Melbourne, Australia. It was a very quick process. I sort of had my interviews with Fidosh and then Michael and Jason. And about a month later was just visa approved and on a plane and sort of thrown onto a project in Miami. So yeah, there's definitely a huge design sort of network in Australia. I do like to think though that New York and especially more so fantasy do have a lot more breadth of designers across the world. So I think that's a really exciting thing, and it's been a pleasure being a part of.
What was the process like when you got hired? Did you submit a portfolio? How many interviews did you have? How did that whole process go in reality?
It was very fast. I sort of applied. I had someone who was able to kind of get me in contact with Fidosh at Fantasy, and I sort of submitted my portfolio. And I think like a day later, I was on the call with Fidosh. I then spoke with Michael and Jason and had an interview at about 2 a.m. my time because of the time difference. So I interviewed in like bottom part pajamas and then professional up top. So that was definitely an interesting process. But in saying that, I also did a design challenge, which was sort of submitted. I spent a week, and I obviously had a full-time job at the time. Spent a week on a design challenge and
Wow.
was hired pretty much the next day. So I think from like end to end, it was about, yeah, just over a week in terms of all the interviews I had. And then the design challenge that I completed, and then the visa process. So, but then that just obviously took a little bit longer, but about a month
Right.
all up in
Okay.
actually doing
what
the
was
move
your
too.
what was your feeling about doing the design challenge? Like, did you feel like it made sense to do a design challenge? Did you feel like upset that someone gave you a design challenge?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
What was it?
I had to do it was for Disney. It was to work on their VR system and sort of understand how we could potentially bring in AR, VR into the Disney app. So that was the brief. And I wasn't at all offended. I think something like, being hired from Australia is a huge thing, and to move someone across to another country, I would expect something like that. And even so, if it was just that it was within Australia as well, I think it's something that's becoming an important thing, because it's also about understanding people's process, not about sort of how great their folio is or how easy they are to work with. I think what I did in that process was show my sketches and my thoughts, and I sort of wrote out a few things, as well as just showing the final product. I think that's what we're really looking for when we hire. You know, there are so many people out there with fantastic dribble portfolios and seeing final work, but for me, I think seeing a process of a designer is definitely more important.
Kyle, when you came in, did you do a test, or did we hire you based on your recent work?
So I actually was going to join the New York office about 7 years ago, if you can remember. You and I were talking. I think you were based out of Napa, I think, at the time. And I was talking with Peter and another guy named Michael. And I was going to join, and I turned it down. And because I just wasn't ready for the big city. I wanted to stay in the Midwest and had other opportunities at that point. Since then, moved out to San Francisco, and I've always kept in touch with Peter, and always have just followed Fantasy's work, just like a lot of people that are probably listening to this. And I was working in-house. I tried the in-house product stuff for a while. Dribbble actually reached out. I think we used Dribbble to look for designers, and Dribbble reached out and said, "Hey, Peter Smart's looking to get you into Fantasy just to have a conversation." And from there, no Dribbble, no tests at all, but had, I think, 3 or 4 conversations and interviews with different types of people at Fantasy, and then never looked back since. It's been absolutely amazing here, and really glad I'm part of the team.
So Kyle, I mean, glad, even though the first run you turned us down, totally understand. Obviously we got you in eventually, which is great. But okay, since you've been here and the kind of work you do, right? Mm-hmm. So is it a situation where you come to Fantasy and there's certain glossy work on the outside that they have, but then you come in, you end up working on some, you know, internal intranet for a bank, you know, like what is the reality? What kind of work have you done?
Yeah, so I came in and, you know, at Fantasy, we when someone starts, we just decorate people's desks. And I had a big old Polaroid photo all over my desktop. And they're like, this is our new client. And we were working with Polaroid at the time. And we had a chance to really kind of, you know, get my feet wet a little bit, and we just dove right in. I think that's kind of what we were looking for at the time, but I think I was ready to do that at the same time as well. So it was definitely a different project than what I was working on. Very, very working with absolutely creative people around the world, but and brand new for me as far as like the type of stuff that we were doing. And so it was great to get a chance to see just the overall process and how we could affect that.
What was the work like that you did before you were at Fantasy, and then when you came into Fantasy, was there a difference? And then what are your skills like, you know, when you joined versus 3 months later or 6 months later? Have they improved? And if so, why have they?
Yeah, so working in-house in product, it's definitely slower. You really have to look at a lot of different things like engineering and stuff like that to get the ball going, especially trying to lead a design team. And so coming into Fantasy, it was much faster. You learn right away as far as just the overall process and how we handle and work with clients on the product design side of things. So definitely learn a lot as far as that stuff. We learned a lot working with remote and global designers, and really just understanding designers' skill sets. I think that's been huge as far as, you know, who we need on these types of projects. And I think Fantasy does such a great job at supporting designers that want to do what they want to do. So if you're a UX designer but love motion, or if you're a UI designer but also love the strategy part, I think like it's really great that we support those types of designers that want to come in and do that.
So is that true, or is that something that you're saying so it sounds good?
It's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, what about
the people we have on this call? You've got Alex who started as a designer, and he's like now 3D and motion like wizard. Andy, you know, has an art degree, so even though he's a designer, he does like all our drawing and storyboarding for us. And you know, Ash has started kind of going into doing, you know, illustrations and things like that when she's kind of doing in line with her projects. So, you know, we all pick up different hats. I know Ash never thought she could sort of art direct some 3D work and stuff like that, but I know she did that on Royal Caribbean. So everyone kind of picks up different hats here, and it's really just what you kind of want to work on at the time.
All right. Well, on that note, all right, let me ask this question. It came from a guy called Dudu Torres on LinkedIn. So how do you keep driving innovation and breaking boundaries, especially now in a remote environment?
It's just a question of, you know, there's a lot of people that tend to look at what somebody's done before, what somebody else has done before, what some agency over the other side of the world has done. And it's really sort of, it's about actually not looking inward and not looking on dribble. It's about trying to actually really trying to solve those sort of problems that these are presenting to us. And they're completely new. For instance, we're working with a lot of automotive sort of companies at the moment, and we're building new technologies with them. But actually, when you look around and trying to find some reference or some, you know, what's gone before, that's completely impossible to do because no one's doing some of the things that we're actually doing now. Can't tell you what they are, but we're doing them. And so it's all about, I guess, it's truly being collaborative between every single part of you know, the teams that we have all around the world. So, you know, we got people in Vietnam, we've got, you know, Russia, we've got, you know, East Coast, West Coast, etc. And it's all actually pooling ideas and actually picking the best parts and not being afraid to not being afraid to sort of get things wrong and sort of chuck in your ideas. It kind of reminds me a little bit of and I'm rambling now, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of that kind of like Pixar kind of analogy where they start to develop characters and sort of ideas. They all sort of get around a big round table, much as this, but they all start to sketch and drawing sort of like cartoons, little doodles of sort of characters, and then they all chuck them in the middle. And then, you know, so you're not precious about it. And then you pick them back up again, and, you know, somebody else draws over the top of them. So they're really developing these, really developing these kind of ideas in terms of character development and not being so egotistical of so precious about your one particular idea. And so it just comes back to that collaborative sort of effort of everybody from different parts of the world. And the fact that we're so remote really kind of lends itself to having all these multicultural, different ways of thinking, different personalities, all sort of coming together to truly come up with something innovative.
Yeah,
All right. Well, on that topic of remote, you know, how does it work then in terms of the process and collaboration and the tools, and how do we keep the culture alive while we work remotely, on top of the fact that, you know, how do we be doing innovative work?
You can't ever sort of falsify culture, can you? It comes from the people. You can't actually ever force it. You know, people want to build culture. People want to sort of, oh, we'll do this and fun and games and stuff and forced fun and all these kind of things. It's all to do with the people that you hire and the people that are at the top throughout the whole company. That's my point of view from that. I've got quite sort of strong opinions on that.
Look, I think that, sorry to jump in, Andy. I think that it is very difficult in the sense of being remote and not having that collaborative workspace where you're just around people all the time, and then also asking for something that's new. And obviously, you know, most innovation comes from collaboration. So basically, I mean, what I've been trying to instill in a lot of the teams that I've been working with is that, you know, it really depends on how you begin a project, how you start your work process, and, you know, like Andy said, you know, we look at a lot of reference material before we even go into design. And a lot of the time, the things that we want to do, we can't find reference material. That tells me you're in a good place. That tells me you're doing something that hasn't been done before, for better or worse, right? Like, let's go down that rabbit hole. Let's figure out if it's for better. And if it's for worse, at least we know that we've gone down there. But yeah, and also just that the mentality going into a project should be, I am here to go above what I've seen in the world, not to meet it, right? What else I've seen in the world. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What else I've seen in the world is the starting point to what we want to do.
Yeah, if you're not scared about doing it, yeah.
Okay, so let's hit on culture for a second, because, you know, I think, Andy, what you said is so true. Forced culture. I mean, we see it in a lot of clients. We see it. We hear about it. And some places have great culture, of course, right? But it's easier to make better culture in small. But typically, I see it in culture at Fantasy over 20 years be so different depending on the type of people that are there. So in my experience, it's really based on the people that really make the culture, those personalities, right? They make it up, especially in a remote environment. But for someone like Alex and you, Andy, when you guys are before COVID, I mean, you're remote as it is. I mean, you know, we've flown you over a few times, Alex, from Russia, for example, for our retreats and for, you know, certain client meetings and whatnot. But the majority of the time you're in Russia. And what does that feel like? I mean, do you feel like an employee? Do you feel like part of the team? Do you feel like some freelancer that can be let go at any time? What does it really feel like?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think before fantasy, I worked only in the office, like only in the environment. And as an introvert, as I am, I couldn't really appreciate the complete isolation, you know? So I really like that you have so much time and you don't spend it to get it to the office, for example. You could spend it to spend with your kids, with your family, or you could spend it like learn new things. But at the same time, yeah, collaboration it's very important. And um, I think it's the most challenging part of working remotely. Like it's the lack of communication. So the communication channel is very limited to Zoom. So you don't see like the typical like emotions or something like this. I think it's very important to for the design, for the creativity as well, to just to talk to people and know them better and see emotions, see how they move, how they feel, how they talk, and all this stuff. I think, yeah, it's great. It's very productive, but you need to go outside at some point and just to meet people and spend as much time as you can with them. And this, again, this just set up a connection. I think this is very important for the creativity.
Right. And what about you, Ash? How are you finding the whole remote thing and keeping some kind of semi-culture or banter going? I mean, is it going, or are we really struggling through this fact that we're forced to be remote right now?
No, I don't think we're struggling at all. I think I obviously was based out of the New York office for up until COVID sort of hit, and we had a wonderful culture just within the office spaces, but also knowing I work mostly with a remote team. Most of the UI team is remote, so something like making sure we're checking in and speaking to people and opening the conversation lines and having quick calls or just doing a general check-in of how people are going across the world. I think now being remote, we've sort of been able to set up these new sort of conversations. Like Michael and I and most of the team, we chat on a very regular basis and just ask how people are, because it's a very different time and we're all experiencing this together, and it's been a challenge for a lot of people because of, I guess, the change that has happened. But we've opened the conversations lines to have a bit of a vent about your situation, to talk a bit more freely and between the offices, and now of course where no one is in the office. So I think we've just had to sort of shift gears with it, but we've definitely still kept the cultural aspect that I always sort of saw within fantasy. So yeah.
All right, good to know. Does everyone else like feel there's certain things we can be doing better as a team? I mean, you know, from a UI perspective, like I know this is being recorded, but to hell with it. Like what are the things that you guys feel that we could improve upon?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we are actually trying to improve upon is allowing designers to do their own thing and to create their own process, their design process. I think like one of the big things that we always ask in our global design all hands at Fantasy is like, how are you staying creative, and what's your day-to-day look like? Everyone has their own different process. People like to work either late nights or early mornings or different things like that. And I think when you start to time box creativity, it becomes really tough for people, especially when they are remote and not with anybody. So one of the things that we're trying to do is really support designers that want to have their own process, obviously making sure they touch base with teams, but let's say they want to take the day and spend it with family, but they want to work most of their time at night. I think that's absolutely something that we should support, and we'll keep our designers creative. And really, I think a lot of companies should probably adopt that model, because the end output in a lot of this work is is definitely much better than when it was when we were time boxing it.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah. That's what counts, though, isn't it?
Go ahead.
Understanding you're a designer or more broadly a creative's mentality, and understanding your own mentality is a key to that. I mean, it's funny because we started doing a bunch of process kind of documentation, and it was done mostly by someone who had more of a UX experience background. And it's funny that when Kyle and I reviewed it, like we both kind of looked at it and said, none of this applies to a designer, right? We have a different way of thinking, less organized, less regimented. Creativity is not that structured. And it's funny, so actually kind of looking at it from your own point of view and realizing when you work best, when the best time for you to actually do your things are, and whether you need breaks or whatever it is.
All right, so one of the things I hear a lot is like, okay, how many positions do you have open for UI people? And reality is, it's kind of sounds weird, but it's unlimited, right? So if there was 20 phenomenal UI people standing outside the door today, we would hire all of them, right? And so the key thing I would want to know as a UI person, okay, I'm interested in working in fantasy, but if I come in, one, what kind of work will I be working on? Who will I be working with? And obviously I'd want to know about the culture and the people and get the click and all that kind of stuff. But what is expected of me? What kind of designer are you looking for? So let's say I have a dribble portfolio of some work, or I haven't really had a chance to do the work that I see on fantasies reels, but I know I could do definitely some of that stuff. Why would you be interested in me, and how do I go about kind of, besides just sending my application in, how can I really get hired into the company?
I think it still goes back to not quite the design challenge way, but in terms of that thought and that unique way of approaching a project. I mean, I went for an experiencce director role for the London office, and knowing what I know now about experiencce directors from fantasy, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not a Russ Hampton. Thank God, there's only one. But it's a case of, it's a case of I went for this job just on a fluke. I was a freelancer, and I was thinking, right, I'm never gonna get to work for sort of somebody like fantasy. I don't want to say like a fanboy and stuff like that. I was being a fan since 1970, or I know it obviously wasn't going since then, but it's a case of you don't think that you're ever going to get to sort of work for sort of somebody like this. But when you sort of like get through those doors and you start to work on sort of all these different kind of projects that we've got, it's just kind of like mind-blowing, and you have that ability to sort of like I think Carl sort of said, and the autonomy of having the ability to not do what you want, but within sort of like boundaries, within reasons. And it's so what we're really after is somebody who does that kind of uniquely different to everybody else. How do you approach that project? I do it by sort of sketching and drawing and sort of whatever it might be. We all come at it from a different angle and different point of view, and I think that really enriches what we're kind of after.
Okay, so Michael, what about you in terms of, on top of that, what are the kind of people we're looking for? So if we were to hire 10 UI people today, what kind of work would they be working on? What are the projects?
Yeah, so the reality is that across the board at fantasy, you can't see a whole in terms of what industries we work in, right? At the moment, we just happen to be doing a lot of automotive and OS based stuff, but we, at times we're doing web projects, at times we're doing e-com, at times we're doing apps, at times we're doing experiential things. Sometimes we're just doing graphics, right? Like I know that recently for Samsung, we just did their wallpapers, like for TV. So I mean, like there's such a breadth of design work. The reality is there's always a place for people who are talented and want to be better. And like you said, David, maybe you haven't got the best portfolio, and it's because you've been stuck at a bank and you have, like, as a designer creating their emails or something like that, you know, and you haven't got the portfolio there yet, but that's okay. Look at Dribbble. There's a big appetite there for people that just find something that they're interested in and do a little dribble shot on it. You know, we as a company do these things called flow presentations. One of the designers actually just gave one of the most brilliant presentations we've ever seen, which is all about astrology in the workplace, right? Like, so find something you're actually interested in. And
Sadly, I missed that, but who gave that presentation?
It was Gabby Belson. It was just brilliant. Like,
wait, astrology in the workplace?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
How did, what?
Yeah, you should actually see, because it's brilliant. It's actually beautifully designed as well, right? Like,
personality types.
Yeah. She just took something that she was interested in, and she created a beautiful presentation about it, like something where she could just have fun designing, and took us all through what she was interested in and how that might apply to maybe resourcing, right? Like, so who works together best, right? So that's the kind of advice I would give people, is really just, we want to see your passion, you know, to the point that Kyle made earlier in terms of, you know, taking on different hats. It's the same with passion on what you're interested in. If you're interested in working on cars, cool, we'll have projects for you. If you're interested in working on fashion, as Ash can attest, we've got work for you.
Let me jump in then on this, Ash. You mentioned Harrods. I know we just recently did the whole Harrods.com, right, I believe. You know, I think it's a great idea to show some people some stuff that we've been working on.
I'd love to show some work. I'll share my screen shortly, but what we worked on, almost this time last year, or year before, I should say, it was about a year ago, as we worked with Harrods and worked out of their London office as well, to sort of establish a new sort of design for their website, a complete sort of overhaul. It was very much about taking something like their luxury store and how do we bring that presence to online. So what I'll do is actually just jump into just some comps I sort of put together as part of sort of a case study, and I'll share that back now. All right, just checking you can see my keynote.
Yep, we can.
Okay, wonderful. So Harrods, yeah, it was a huge project. We had a massive team, and we sort of came up with this, and we sort of partnered with Farfetch, Harrods, and of course Fantasy to sort of come up with this gorgeous design, which is all about kind of breaking away from like traditional e-com and being very experimental in terms of just that sort of luxury presence. And of course we have with Harrods, and it was definitely about pushing the boundaries and sort of really understanding how we can sort of further the design, and again, taking away from sort of a very structured general e-com platform, and about putting together these gorgeous sort of design systems that Harrods can run with. And we had a wonderful partnership with them during our time with them. It was a very long process, and it's sort of all come to light now. And there's been a wonderful response to the design that we obviously presented back to them. And yeah, it's live now.
So you drove the whole design language for this?
Yeah, I did. I was sort of the design lead, and we had a few other designers, of course, paired with UX from our side and our experienced director Jackie. And we actually worked closely with the Harrods team. One of the most exciting things was with this project was this particular slide was part of the pitch deck. So it really didn't change that much from what we did from taking the pitch into the final product, because we sort of were able to nail the vision very early on. So that was something which I found to be super beneficial, is having this as a pitch already was so exciting. To be a part of something like Harrods from just like a global standpoint is huge. So knowing it didn't actually change dramatically from what we presented very early on and our vision at Fantasy to where it ended up was pretty exciting to know they had complete trust in us from sort of day dot. So that was definitely some work that we had presented and now is live. So I'd encourage anyone to go and have a look at the Harrods website.
All right, amazing. And it's also a phenomenal brand. I mean, when I grew up in Ireland, you know, Harrods, you know, and even over here in the States, Harrods is like a major thing, right? Kind of like Aston Martin in the car design world. Harrods is that in the fashion, right? So this, for me, it was amazing. When I heard we're working with Harrods, like, holy crap. But anyway, it looks amazing. I'm super glad that obviously everyone's a happy camper. So what about from a product perspective, Alex? Do you want to share anything that you've been doing on the product side?
Of course. Michael mentioned automotive area. It's a huge area that we're working on, and we're still gaining experience in this area, and we just try to be as creative as we can. So yeah, I could share the GAC project, which is China, huge automotive company. We start with the different approach right now. So in terms of the process, the client was really not sure about their like taste and what they really want to see. So we created the deck where we just we just wanted to know the client better, and we just put this like a little progress here. So do you want a UI to be more minimalistic or like a full load of details, you know?
We are definitely looking to grow that HMI team. So to design this kind of stuff here, I mean, you didn't do this before you came to Fantasy. So how do we end up doing this if you've never done it before? What are the kind of people that we're looking for that we're going to add to this team? Are we going to expect them to send us a shot like this because they've already done it somewhere else? That's not realistic, right? So typically when they come into Fantasy to work on HMI, it'll probably be for the first time, right?
Yeah, I think so. And that's what I'm just trying to say as well, because we didn't have this experience as well. And I think that's why big companies really want to hire us as well, because we don't have this classic experience, like classic car experience. Because what they do in their design departments is just a classic, not outside of the box, right? So this is very, very conventional stuff, and they realize that the market is changing right now, and they really wanted something outside of the box. That's why they hired us as well. I think, Michael, if you have something to add.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, here's the baseline, David, is no one's done it, right? Like, you got to remember, we haven't done this either, right? Like, you know, yes, you're looking at finished work because we've had the chance to work on it, but every time we go into an automotive project, it's something new, whether it's a new technology, whether it's a new module that they didn't have on that car before, whether it's new screen sizes. I mean, right now we're doing full dashboard screens, right? So there are a lot of new things that if you come into it thinking that you have an idea, then you've already failed, because the truth is we're all new to this. The automotive industry is a fresh baby for us, you know, like for UI designers. Pretty much every automotive company, probably except for the newer ones like a Tesla or a Lucid or something like that, they think in a very analog way. So we're bringing a new train of thought to them. And like, it's a learning curve every day, right? Where you just have to be open to understanding that you might not have the best understanding of this, but you might be able to bring a great idea, whether it's a small one in the corner, whether it's a big one. There's so much stuff that is involved with these kinds of designs that even a small addition is fantastic. So like I said, the simple truth is, don't ever feel afraid of tackling it, because if you feel like you don't have the experience, neither do we, right? We're okay. Figuring out a lot of the stuff as we go along.
Fair stuff. Okay, Kyle had to jump off. By the way, I just saw in the chat he had to jump on a client call. But let me ask you this, right? So, Ash, you worked in Harrods, and now would you be able to work on that kind of GAC work, or we know all the other stuff we're doing that we can't say, but are we expecting a designer to come in and be able to take on anything? Or are we expecting a UI designer to come in and, you know, we know they're really good at flat design, but they're not so strong at doing kind of, you know, more the 3D side of things or the Photoshop details? Or we have another designer that's really good at Photoshop, but they're not really good at layout. I mean, how can we talk about that a little bit? Because not everyone can do everything, right? People today have to kind of their niche.
Sure, I think that's a great question, especially because I'm definitely someone who's more comfortable in a certain craft. As you sort of mentioned, I've definitely sort of found my niche, but in saying that, there's so much flexibility in terms of the amazing resources that we have a part of the team. So I might not know how to do something 3D as incredible as Alex or as someone else in our team, but we have the resources and we encourage everyone to learn from the members that we have on staff. So it's definitely out of my comfort zone to do something more so product driven or, you know, heavy with motion. In saying that though, I've got all the tools, I've got all the resources, I've got the team to sort of help me and support me to kind of create that sort of end result too. So we do focus on finding people that are, you know, obviously excellent in their particular craft, but it's also about the vision. I might have the vision, but I might need some support from someone else who is obviously has the craft of 3D or motion. So I don't necessarily think we hire people that can do all of them. We have people that can.
Yeah, you're such a show.
So I think it's really about having a creative vision, and we can definitely help nurture whatever you believe in terms of your design craft and where you want to take it.
You know, Ash just said that, and she said, you know, like that she's, you know, kind of has a particular craft style. But at the same time, we constantly talk about what other things she wants to learn, right? Does she want to learn more management? Does she want to learn a different style? I've given her the opportunity to come onto some of the automotive things, and it hasn't been the right time, but she's already expressed that it's something that she might want to get involved with, right? So it's you know, it's really also about what you want to do. We don't care if you don't want to do automotive, or you don't want to do fashion, or you don't want to do econ, but what we do care is that you do want to expand your skill set, right?
Yeah.
Where you want to go, we're happy with that.
Nobody gets set up to fail. I got to say, you know, in terms of I've gone into a couple of projects that I've been like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a little bit scared about what I'm doing. You know, I started new, fresh, and thinking, God, where are we going with this? But you know, with the teams and the people that are in the right sort of places, we've got a fairly sort of flat sort of hierarchy as well. So, you know, you don't feel daunted to go to your boss or whoever it might be. Like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm sort of like fairly uncomfortable, and it's not a case of like, let's hand this over to somebody else. It's more a case of, okay, well, let's work this out, because normally they'll be like, well, yeah, well, I don't know what we're going to do for this one bit here, so let's figure it out together. And you know, so we're not set up to fail at all. It's great.
All right, that's good to hear. So then, Andy, what have you got to show? Do you have any juicy stuff that you've worked on? I don't exactly know what you've worked on, so
yeah, I've worked on a bit of Lincoln stuff. I've worked on a bit of OnePlus stuff. See that one?
Well, look at you with your very nicely prepared sketch file. Is it?
It was prepared beforehand. Here's one he prepared earlier.
Yeah, it was a one prepared earlier, because this is the one that we actually sent to clients. So recently we've helping out the OnePlus team in terms of breaking the convention and breaking the rules of sort of Android. So OnePlus, essentially, they make phones. So they're a Chinese-based sort of company, but they have you know, loads of different. I think they have two different sort of operating systems. So we actually worked on the Oxygen side, just to basically break sort of convention. They were going into kind of a route of sort of iterating on past versions, and we were brought in to basically drop that kind of bomb and sort of blow things apart, make things, you know, come up with new sort of ways of working in terms of one-handedness, different UX sort of paradigms, etc. And yeah, with that we came up with a slightly new, bolder way of actually showing off their visual design as well. Oh, so, excuse me.
So yeah. Andy, how you know, to do this operating system? I know we work with LG, Samsung, Huawei, OnePlus, Polaroid, you know, blah blah blah, goes on and on. But what does it take? What kind of? I mean, are you just sitting there doing this all by yourself? what is the team involved? So if I want to join the UI team, am I going to be expected to drive an entire UI and design language and motion design language by myself? How does that
I'd
work?
love to say, yeah, I'd love to say that I've done it all myself, but no, nowhere near. I mean, this is again a collaborative effort of UX designers, of design directors.
Look, let's wrap this up. I know we've been on this for a while, so but let me ask the last question then to you all. For UI people that we want in our team, let's get advice from each one of you. By the way, Michael, you're still sharing, but what kind of advice do you have, Michael, Alex, Andy, Ash, for like, who do you want? Like, what is your vision or dream of the kind of person that you want to basically work with you alongside these projects?
I want people, first and foremost, that want to do better than they did yesterday. And that can take in a number of different forms. Obviously, there's also needs from a skill point of view. And obviously I want a big range of people. I want people that can do amazing 3D work. I want people that can do amazing Photoshop work, amazing UI interaction work, illustration, you name it. There's not a discipline that I won't use in some way. But the general type of person that I want at Fantasy is someone that doesn't see a roadblock as a dead end, but rather sees it as a challenge and find some way of going through it. They're not expected to go through it by themselves. I think a couple of people have mentioned, like, we've got a great group of Fantasy that'll help you at a drop of a hat, right? Seriously, just instantly. They'll drop everything they're doing and they'll get on a call with you. But if we have that mentality of like, I just want to be better, that's how you do it.
That's what we want. It's the attitude, right? It's the most important thing almost. Alex.
Like, be open and be curious, because, like, for example, I work only in Figma, or I work only in Sketch and nothing else, I think this is like, and all this conversation about the tools, it's very overthinking concept in the design field. I think, yeah, just be open and be curious, be like passionate. And I think just learn. Yeah, I think it's the only ask.
All right, sounds good. From our colleague in Moscow, Andy. Which part of the UK are you in? You're in London, or?
Yeah, I'm just based outside of London. Yeah, should have said that at the start,
right.
Really.
So do you and Ash have some advice? Yeah,
in terms of no egos. In terms of being humble, I mean, we've sort of said about being passionate, being sort of, I'm hoping that people that do apply for a place at sort of Fantasy, just, skills, that's fine, but it's just a case of being humble and having the ability to say when you're wrong.
Ash, so to you, yeah, what would be your advice on, the kind of people that you want in your team?
Sure. I think, definitely after going through quite a lot of interviews recently, I think people that can bring their own personality and have some ownership over their own skill set, but also be willing to learn, I think is also something. I don't know everything. I certainly have areas I'd like to learn from other people of the team, but also just be willing to do that. But I also think being your own person, and I want to see, when you present your folio, I want to see a little bit of you in it. I don't want to see just gorgeous dribble shots. I think it's all about the person as well, and bringing your own spin on things.
All right. I mean, that's it. I think 100% agree. So why don't we call this a wrap? I mean, I think we should definitely do more of these meetings, but we'll do more design topics. I think this is going to be worth it for the audience. But thank you to all those that have listened to this. Thank you to all of you guys for participating. We'll bring in more team members as time goes. UI@fantasy.co is the best email. Email us your work. Passion, proactivity, and talent, of course, are three very important things, but the attitude is going to be the number one for us, right? So if you feel that you're not ready to join Fantasy, take any shot that we've ever done, you see in Dribble, or any work that we have, and try and replicate it and send it to us. And if we know that you can do that, then we want to talk to you about your attitude and how we can get you into Fantasy. It doesn't matter if you're on the moon, on Mars, it doesn't matter what part of the planet you're on Earth. we're ready to take on those people, right? But thank you so much, everybody. And we'll do this again. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Super.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers all.
Good.
Bye.
Guys, amazing. Thank you for doing this recording.